My relatives attempted to hijack my $3.4 million trust fund while I was legally a child. On my 18th birthday, exactly at midnight, I authorized one transfer that made their entire scheme implode before breakfast. At my graduation brunch, the air smelled like expensive catering and cheap intentions. My stepdad, Reed, clinked a silver spoon against his crystal champagne flute. The sound cut through the low chatter of the 50 guests crowded into our backyard. He looked the part of the grieving but supportive father, wearing a tailored navy blazer that probably cost more than my first car. He cleared his throat, flashed that perfectly practiced, camera-ready smile, and announced that he was setting up a private family office to manage my late mother's tech patents. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver keychain with a familiar crest. He held out the keys to a brand new Porsche. "Petra is completely on board, right, kiddo?" he asked. The guests beamed at me. A collective awe rippled through the crowd. My Aunt Sylvia, standing just behind him in a cream silk blouse, gave me a tight, expectant nod. I didn't reach for the keys. I didn't smile back. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my sparkling cider, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make the people closest to us shift uncomfortably. "I never signed your management waiver, Reed," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The color drained from his face. His hand, still holding the Porsche keys, dropped an inch. He let out a nervous chuckle, glancing at the guests. "Well, the lawyers are handling the paperwork this week, sweetheart. We don't need to bore everyone with the legalities." He was blind. He had no idea what was actually happening. Just 8 hours prior, I had locked down every royalty stream, making that intellectual property exclusively mine. Let me rewind 4 months. My mom passed away on a Tuesday in February. She was brilliant, exhausted, and holding the rights to cloud computing algorithms valued at $3.4 million. The algorithms were highly specialized data compression structures used by 3 major enterprise software firms. The royalties were passive, consistent, and massive. Before we had even picked out her headstone, Reed and my Aunt Sylvia were huddled in the sunroom. I had walked downstairs to get a glass of water and heard the distinct sound of hushed, hurried voices. I stood perfectly still in the hallway. They were whispering about offshore holding companies. They were arguing over tax percentages and jurisdiction laws in the Caymans. I was 17. They figured I was just a grieving teenager who didn't understand complex finance. Someone who would just nod and sign wherever they put a yellow sticky tab. 2 days later, I was tasked with packing up my mom's bedroom. Reed didn't want to do it. He said it was too painful. The truth was, he couldn't stand being in a room surrounded by things he hadn't paid for. I was going through her jewelry, sorting rings and necklaces into velvet trays. When I sat down at her vintage vanity desk, I ran my hand along the bottom edge of the center drawer, feeling for the hidden catch she used to show me when I was a kid. My fingers brushed against something hard and plastic. Tape. I peeled it off. It was a micro USB drive, secured with heavy-duty electrical tape. She knew I would be the one to pack up her jewelry. She knew I was the only one who remembered the trick with the drawer. I locked my bedroom door, plugged the drive into my laptop, and opened the files. There were no photos, no sentimental letters, just unredacted corporate bylaws for an entity called the Vanguard IP Trust, and a single encrypted text file containing the secure email address of a forensic financial advisor in Zurich named Henrik. I drafted an email to Henrik that night. The response came back 3 months before my 18th birthday. From henrik.vanguard@securemail.ch to P. Callahan, subject, Vanguard initiation. Your mother embedded an age trigger in the corporate structure. The patents, the accrued royalties, the voting shares, all $3.4 million. You are the sole executive director. Your stepdad and aunt have zero legal equity. Reed could draft all the LLC agreements he wanted. He could hire expensive estate lawyers in Chicago to draw up management waivers. They were worthless paper. He was trying to steal a house he didn't even have the keys to. Then came the mistake that sealed it. We shared an Apple Cloud account for family calendars. My iPad synced a calendar alert from Reed's account late one Thursday night. It wasn't an alert. It was an auto-downloaded Zoom recording from a meeting he had forgotten to delete. The file was named Project Vanguard Q3 Strategy. I put my headphones on and hit play. Reed was sitting in his home office, rubbing his temples. Sylvia was on the other end of the screen, looking impatient. "I already took out a $600,000 bridge loan against the Q4 royalty projections," Reed was saying, his voice tight with panic. "The interest is compounding weekly. We just need the IP transferred to our Cayman shell by Tuesday. If the transfer doesn't clear before the lender does a deep audit, I'm ruined." Sylvia rolled her eyes, letting out a cold, sharp laugh. "She's 17, Reed. Buy her a fancy car for graduation. Throw a party. She'll be distracted. Just put the waiver in front of her with the title for the car. She'll sign it without reading it." I closed the iPad. The air in my bedroom felt suddenly thin. My chest tightened, a heavy, sick feeling settling in my stomach. My stepdad hadn't just planned to manage the money. He had already spent it. He had leveraged a massive, high-interest loan against intellectual property he did not own, using collateral he could never legally produce. He was trying to use my mother's life's work to cover his own catastrophic financial bets. I opened my laptop and messaged Henrik through the encrypted portal. "They are accelerating. Reed has a $600K loan against the Q4 projections." 3 minutes later, Henrik responded. "Protocol verified. We execute on your birthday. Hold your nerve, Petra." The night before I turned 18, I sat alone in the dark in my bedroom. I watched the digital clock on my nightstand. 11:58 p.m. 11:59 p.m. Midnight struck. I logged into the Swiss portal. Henrik was already waiting on a secure video link. He looked exactly like his email sounded. Sharp, unsmiling, wearing a charcoal turtleneck. "Happy birthday, Petra," he said softly. "Are you ready?" "Do it," I said. I authenticated my biometric scan on the portal, pressing my thumb to the scanner pad, and clicked submit. The screen flashed green. Transfer complete. I was officially the sole executive controller of the Vanguard IP Trust. At 8 Apollo am sharp, Henrik notified the U.S. Patent Registry and triggered the poison pill clause. The royalties were legally frozen and routed to a newly secured impenetrable holding account. At 9:15 4:15 a.m., Reed walked into his wealth management firm in Chicago, nursing a hangover from the pre-graduation celebrations. According to Henrik's later debrief, Reed's broker pulled up the corporate routing numbers to execute the Cayman transfer and frowned at his terminal. "I cannot authorize this wire, Reed," the broker said. "The intellectual property was locked into a Zurich-based defensive trust at midnight. It's completely inaccessible." The broker paused, looking at a flashing red notification on his screen. "There is also an active SEC flag on your bridge loan account regarding unverified collateral." Reed called me from the lobby of his building at 9:35 a.m. He was hyperventilating. "What did you just do?" he gasped. "I stood by my bedroom window, looking out at the caterers setting up the backyard for the brunch. I took control of the legacy my mother built for me. That IP was meant to support all of us," he yelled, his voice cracking. "She wanted me to manage it, because she loved me, because we were a family." "No, Reed," I said, my voice dead calm. "Because she knew you were drowning in debt and she didn't trust you." Dead silence on the line. I could hear him breathing heavily, the ambient noise of downtown Chicago traffic humming in the background. "You little bitch," he finally hissed. "I'm calling my lawyers. I will sue you for breach of family equity. I will drag you through probate court until that trust is bled dry by legal fees." Then Henrik's crisp, accented voice cut through the speaker. "I had conferenced him in. Mr. Callahan," Henrik said. "Suing a federally protected IP trust while under active investigation for fraudulent loan collateralization will result in immediate federal indictment. Your lender has already been notified of the fraud. I strongly advise you hang up." Click. I set my phone down on the vanity desk, right over the spot where the USB drive had been taped. Somewhere across the city, Reed's bridge loan was going into default. His financial life was unraveling by the minute. A brand new Porsche. That is what they offered me at brunch a few hours later. They thought they were handing me a massive bribe. Turns out they were trying to buy me off with a fraction of my own net worth. After brunch, Reed locked himself in his study. Sylvia left without saying goodbye. I went up to my room, feeling a strange, quiet sense of victory. I opened my laptop to check the Vanguard portal one last time. There was a new, urgent message from Henrik. I opened it, expecting a confirmation of Reed's legal surrender. Instead, it was 4 words that made my blood go cold. "There is a third party." I stared at the screen. I typed back immediately. "What does that mean? Reed? Sylvia? From Henrik.Vanguard@SecureMail to P. Callahan." "Neither. Someone has been filing silent claims against the trust for months. Someone who knew about the age trigger clause before you did, before I did, before anyone. Someone your mother never mentioned in any of her directives." He attached a PDF of the legal filing. I opened it, scanning the dense legalese until I found the claimant's name. Arlo Locke. I didn't recognize it. I had never heard my mother speak that name in my entire life. I scrolled down to the bottom of the document to look at the filing date. February 12th. It was the exact same day my mother died. I picked up my phone and dialed Henrik's direct secure line. He answered on the first ring. "Who is Arlo Locke?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I am currently running a full background trace," Henrik said, the sound of rapid typing echoing over the line. "But you need to understand the gravity of this, Petra. Reed was a nuisance. He was an outside actor trying to break in. This filing, it is internal." "What do you mean internal? I'm the sole executive director." "You are. But Locke isn't contesting your control of the trust. He is contesting the origin of the IP itself. He has submitted seed funding agreements, bearing your mother's verified signature, predating the Vanguard charter by 10 years. He claims 50% equity." I felt the room tilt slightly. "Is it a forgery?" "The patent office does not believe so. They have placed a secondary hold on the liquid assets. The trust is secure from Reed, but Locke's claim supersedes the Vanguard defensive structure." Henrik stopped typing. The silence on the line was suffocating. "He isn't trying to steal it, Petra. According to this paperwork, he legally already owns half of it." "Half." I repeated the word, feeling it turn sour in my mouth. "My mother built that architecture from scratch. I watched her code it at the kitchen table until 3 in the morning for years. She coded the secondary architecture." Henrik corrected gently, his voice carrying the static of the encrypted line. "The foundational algorithms, the base layer that allows the compression to function, were established in 2014. The seed funding agreement from Arlo Locke includes a transfer of those base layer rights. He provided the initial capital and the core mathematical framework. In exchange, your mother signed a perpetual 50% equity stake in whatever the project became. Why didn't she tell me?" My grip on the phone tightened. "She left me the trust. She left me you. She left me all these instructions to stop Reed. Why leave a blind spot this massive?" "I don't know, Petra." For the first time since I'd known him, Henrik sounded genuinely uncertain. "But we have a more pressing issue. The filing date. February 12th. Yes, the day she died. The timestamp on the filing is 4:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time." I did the math in my head. My mother passed away in hospice at 11:30 a.m. 5 hours later, Arlo Locke was filing a legal claim on her life's work. He knew, I said, a cold realization washing over me. He wasn't just sitting around in Seattle waiting for an obituary. Someone told him she was gone the minute it happened, or he was already watching. Before Henrik could reply, heavy footsteps thudded up the hardwood stairs. "Petra." Reed's fist pounded against my bedroom door. The wood rattled in its frame. "Petra, open this door right now." His voice was shrill, completely devoid of the smooth country club polish he'd had at brunch. My broker just froze my personal checking account. The lender issued a default notice. They're going to put a lien on the house. I muted Henrik on the phone and walked over to the door, but I didn't unlock it. I leaned my forehead against the cool white paint. "Sounds like a you problem, Reed," I said. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice cracking. I could hear his ragged breathing through the gap under the door. "I leveraged everything. The cars, the equity in this house. If that Cayman transfer doesn't go through, I am personally liable for $600,000 plus penalties. I will go to prison for wire fraud." "Petra, is that what you want? Your mother's husband in a federal penitentiary?" "You shouldn't have lied to the bank," I said, keeping my voice flat. "And you shouldn't have tried to steal from a 17-year-old. I was trying to protect our family. You were trying to cover your bad stock options." I saw the Q3 free strategy video. Read, I know about the bridge loan. I know what you and Sylvia were planning. The money is gone. The IP is gone. Pack your bags. This is my house, he screamed, kicking the bottom of the door. The impact made me flinch back. I'm on the deed, actually, I said, looking over at my laptop screen where the Vanguard corporate structure was still displayed. You're on a revocable trust deed that defaulted to my sole ownership at midnight last night. You have 30 days to vacate. I'd suggest you use them to find a good defense attorney. He didn't scream again. I heard a low, wretched sound, like a man realizing he had just stepped off a cliff and was waiting to hit the bottom. Then, slowly, his footsteps retreated down the hall. I unmuted the phone. Henrik, I'm back. Is the situation contained? For now. Reed is panicking. He's not going to be a threat to the IP. He's just going to be a mess. I walked back to my desk and sat down. Tell me everything you have on Arlo Locke. If he's a corporate raider, I need to know what kind of legal team I'm up against. I heard the rapid clack of Henrik's keyboard. That is the strange part, Petra. He is not a corporate raider. He is not affiliated with any venture capital firm or tech conglomerate. Then who is he? He is a 46-year-old high school mathematics teacher in suburban Portland. He drives a 9-year-old Subaru. He has a mortgage on a 2-bedroom townhouse. His annual salary is $72,000. He has no criminal record, no history of civil litigation, and no other registered patents. I stared at the wall. A high school teacher. Yes, a high school teacher is holding hostage $1.7 million of liquid royalties. Legally, yes, and he is represented by a very aggressive, very expensive boutique law firm in San Francisco. A firm that a high school teacher absolutely cannot afford on retainer. Someone is backing his play. Or they took the case on contingency because the payout is guaranteed, I guessed. Also possible. Henrik agreed. I have reached out to his attorney, a man named Jasper Farrow. Farrow declined a phone call and stated all communication must be routed through official discovery. They are stonewalling us. They want the patent office to force a payout. No, I said. No payouts. Not until I know who this guy is and what he actually did for my mother. Where did they meet? University of Washington. They were in the same graduate computer science cohort in 2006. They co-authored 2 papers on data compression, then Locke dropped out of the program. Your mother finished her master's, went into the private sector, and eventually launched Vanguard. Locke got a teaching certificate. I looked down at the vanity desk. The tape residue was still there from where the USB drive had been hidden. My mother was meticulous. She documented everything. If Arlo Locke was owed 50% of her life's work, she wouldn't have just ignored it. She would have left a ledger, a note, a contingency plan. She wouldn't have built the Vanguard Defensive Trust just to let a 10-year-old seed agreement tear it in half, unless she forgot. But my mother never forgot a line of code, let alone a contract. Henrik, keep pushing the lawyer. Find out if they're willing to settle. Don't offer anything yet, just gauge their temperature. Understood? And Petra, be careful. Reed is desperate. Desperate men do not act rationally. I'll lock my door, I said, and hung up. I sat in the silence of my bedroom for a long time. Downstairs, I could hear the caterers packing up the brunch equipment, the clinking of glass, the murmur of polite, awkward apologies as guests made their excuses and left. The celebration was over. I went to my closet and pulled down a heavy plastic storage bin from the top shelf. It was filled with my mother's old academic stuff, textbooks, spiral notebooks, printed syllabi. I had planned to donate most of it. Now, I dragged the bin into the center of the room and popped the lid. It smelled like old paper and dried binding glue. I started digging. I bypassed the standard textbooks and looked for anything handwritten. At the bottom, beneath a stack of printed thesis drafts, I found a black Moleskine journal. The spine was cracked. The year 2006 was written on the cover in silver Sharpie. I flipped it open. The pages were dense with her tight cursive handwriting, interspersed with blocks of raw code and architectural diagrams. I skimmed through January, February, March. It was mostly academic frustration, complaints about professors, notes on failed compression tests. Then, in mid-April, the tone shifted. April 14th. AL cracked the base sequence. I've been looking at this backwards for 3 weeks. He looked at it for 10 minutes and inverted the logic gate. He's brilliant. Terrifyingly brilliant. Why is he wasting his time grading freshman calculus exams? I turned the page. May 2nd. We ran out of server space. The university won't allocate more for an independent project. AL took out a personal loan, $15,000. He said he believes in the architecture. I told him I couldn't pay him back anytime soon. He drafted a seed agreement on a napkin at the diner, 50% equity. We signed it. It felt like a joke, but he took it to a notary the next morning. I kept reading, my heart beating faster. They were a team. They were building it together. But then, in late November, the entries stopped being about code. November 18th. He's getting paranoid. He thinks the department head is trying to steal the framework. He won't let me back up the files on the university mainframe anymore. He bought external drives and keeps them in a safe in his apartment. He's not sleeping. December 4th. I had to lock him out. I changed the admin passwords. He came to my apartment at 2 am screaming that I was compromising the data. I don't know what's happening to him. He's seeing threats that aren't there. December 12th. He dropped out. He just packed up his desk and left. He sent me an email saying the architecture is tainted. He told me to burn it. He said if I ever commercialize it, he'll know. I stared at the last entry. The ink was pressed so hard into the paper it had nearly torn through the page. Arlo Locke didn't just fund the project. He co-created it, had a mental breakdown, and abandoned it. My mother had taken the broken pieces, rebuilt them, and spent the next 10 years turning it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. She hadn't hidden him from me because she was trying to screw him out of money. She hid him because he was unstable. But that didn't explain the timing. How did a high school math teacher in Portland, who had completely disconnected from the tech world for a decade, know to file a claim on the exact afternoon my mother died? My phone buzzed on the desk. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a text from an unknown number. Area code 503. Portland. Hello, Petra. I see Henrik has frozen the assets. Smart move. Your mother taught you well, but we need to talk. I stared at the glowing screen, my thumb hovering over the glass. I typed back, who is this? dots. 3 dots appeared immediately. This is Arlo. Please don't give the San Francisco lawyers any money. They don't work for me. I stared at the screen for exactly 3 seconds before I hit the green phone icon. I bypassed the encrypted portal, bypassed Henrik, and called the Portland number directly. It rang twice. Petra, a voice said. He sounded exhausted, not dangerous, not calculating, just deeply, profoundly tired. Prove it, I said, keeping my voice hard. What diner did you sign the seat agreement at? What did you spill on the napkin? A heavy exhale came through the speaker. Pete's on 45th in the U District. I knocked over a mug of drip coffee, and it stained the bottom left corner. Your mother laughed so hard she choked on a French fry. She said we were officially binding a multi-million-dollar architecture with hazelnut creamer. I closed my eyes. It was him. The handwriting in the journal, the frantic late-night entries, the breakdown, it all belonged to the man on the other end of the line. Okay, Arlo, I said, leaning back against my headboard. If Jasper Farrow and his expensive San Francisco law firm don't work for you, who pays their retainer? Your aunt, he said softly. Sylvia. The name hit me like a physical blow. I opened my eyes, staring at the blank white wall of my bedroom. My mind violently rewound through the last 4 months. Sylvia in the sunroom with Reed. Sylvia at the graduation brunch, pushing him to give me the Porsche. Sylvia laughing about how distracted I would be. She came to Portland 6 weeks ago. Arlo continued, his voice tight. She cornered me in the parking lot of my high school. I hadn't thought about that code in 10 years. I left the tech world because it was destroying my mind, Petra. I teach algebra. I make a decent living. I have a life. I didn't even know your mother was sick until Sylvia showed me the death certificate. She didn't come to you out of the goodness of her heart to give you a payout, I said. No, she came to force a proxy transfer. She had my medical records from 2006, the psych hold, the breakdown. She had everything. She told me she was going to take it to the school board, the parents association, and the state licensing committee. She said she would paint me as an unstable, paranoid schizophrenic who was a danger to minors. I just got tenure, Petra. I'm 10 years sober. If she blew up my life here, I'd have nothing. So you signed it over. She had a document ready, a complete transfer of proxy and executive control over the seat agreement. I signed it on the hood of her rental car. She owns my 50% claim. And because the seat agreement predates your mother's trust, Sylvia's lawyers filed the secondary hold to freeze the entire Vanguard structure. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to reach you until I saw the defensive trust activate this morning. That's public record if you know where to look. It gave me your name as the executor. Reed, I said, the puzzle pieces snapping together with sickening clarity. Did she mention Reed? She said her brother-in-law was a useful idiot who was going to pay for the lawyers. That's all. I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. I walked out of my bedroom and stood at the top of the stairs. The house was dead quiet. The caterers had packed up the last of the brunch tables an hour ago. The driveway was mostly empty, save for Reed's leased Mercedes and my mother's old Volvo. Sylvia's rental car was gone. I walked down the stairs, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. I found Reed in the kitchen. He was sitting at the marble island, a half-empty bottle of bourbon in front of him. He wasn't wearing his tailored navy blazer anymore. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled, and he was staring at his phone like it was a live grenade. He didn't even look up when I walked in. The bank just issued a formal recall on the bridge loan, he said, his voice completely hollow. 30 days to produce $600,000, or they seize the house and turn it over to federal prosecutors. I walked over to the sink and poured myself a glass of water. Where is Sylvia? She left, said she couldn't watch me self-destruct. She took an Uber to O'Hare. He let out a bitter, wet laugh, rubbing his hands over his face. She was supposed to be the smart one. She's the one who found the Cayman loophole. She set up the holding company. I just handled the bank side. Whose name is on the Cayman holding company, Reed? He blinked, looking up at me through bloodshot eyes. What? The offshore shell you were trying to wire the Vanguard IP into this morning. Who owns it? We both do, he said defensively. We split the incorporation fees. Pull up the paperwork, I demanded. Petra, I am not in the mood to. Pull up the goddamn paperwork, Reed, or I call Henrik right now and have him forward the fraud alert to the FBI field office. He flinched. With shaking hands, he unlocked his iPad on the counter and tapped into a secure document folder. He pulled up the Cayman registry documents and slid the tablet across the marble island. I looked at the executive summary. Managing Director, Sylvia Vanguard. Voting shares, 100%. Secondary beneficiaries, none. I spun the iPad around so he could see it. Look at the ownership structure. Reed squinted at the screen. It took him a few seconds to process the legalese, but when he did, the remaining color drained from his face. That's a typo. We filed it jointly. The lawyer in Chicago drafted it for both of us. She played you, I said, my voice eerily calm. She knew my mother built a defensive trust. She knew it would trigger the moment you tried to move the assets. She pushed you to take out the bridge loan to force your hand, knowing you would trip the alarms. Why would she do that? He whispered, staring at the screen. That doesn't make any sense. If the trust locked us out, she gets nothing too. Because while you were tripping the alarms at the front door, she was already inside the house, I said. She found Arlo locked. She blackmailed him for his 50% seed equity. She didn't need the Cayman shell for your bridge loan, Reed. She needed it as a perfectly clean, offshore receptacle for when she liquidates the IP through probate court. Reed just sat there, his mouth slightly open, the bourbon sitting heavy in his glass. He was completely out of his depth. He was a small-time financial climber who thought he was pulling a fast one on a teenager. Sylvia was playing a 10-year corporate acquisition strategy, using her own family as collateral damage. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A new message from Henrik. Petra, the San Francisco firm just filed a motion for emergency asset liquidation. They are bypassing probate entirely. They are claiming Vanguard is a hostile entity illegally hoarding proprietary technology. The hearing is set for Friday morning. If we don't present the original seed owner to invalidate the proxy, the judge will freeze the trust indefinitely and appoint a third-party receiver. I looked up from the screen. The front door of the house unlocked with a loud, metallic click. Reed jumped. I stood perfectly still. Footsteps clicked across the hardwood of the foyer, slow and deliberate. A moment later, Sylvia walked into the kitchen. She wasn't wasn't carrying her luggage. She wasn't on her way to O'Hare. She had simply waited down the street for the brunch to end and the guests to leave. She looked at Reed, taking in the bourbon, the sweat on his forehead, the sheer panic radiating off him. Then she looked at me. Her expression was perfectly smooth, completely devoid of the familial warmth she had faked for the last 4 months. "I see the two of you have been catching up," Sylvia said, setting her designer handbag on the kitchen counter. She reached in and pulled out a manila folder, dropping it onto the marble island next to Reed's iPad. "You set me up," Reed choked out, standing up from his stool. "You used my loan to trigger the SEC flag. You used your own greed to trigger the flag, Reed," Sylvia replied, not even raising her voice. "I simply gave you the rope. You were always too sloppy to manage an asset of this size. You would have let it dry on bad investments within 3 years." She turned her attention to me. Her eyes were cold, clinical. "I have to admit, Petra, the Zurich trust was a nice touch. Your mother always was incredibly paranoid, but a defensive trust can only protect assets that legally belong to it." She tapped the manila folder. 50% of that code belongs to Arlo Locke, and Arlo Locke gave me his proxy. So, as of this morning, I own half of Vanguard. "You blackmailed a high school teacher," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "You threatened to ruin a man's life over a napkin he signed a decade ago." Sylvia smiled, a thin, sharp line across her face. "Business is ugly, sweetheart. Your mother knew that. That's why she cut me out of the original IPO. I financed her entire graduate degree. I paid her rent when she was living in that shoebox in Seattle, writing the very code that made her rich. She promised me a cut when it went to market, and then she locked it all away in a proprietary trust and told me I was financially irresponsible." Sylvia stepped closer, leaning her hands on the counter. "I'm not trying to steal anything, Petra. I'm just collecting on a very old debt." "By liquidating the entire company?" I asked. "If you force a sale on Friday, the patent loses half its value. You destroy the architecture." "I don't care about the architecture," she said plainly. "I care about the payout. The enterprise firms that lease the code will buy the patents outright for a lump sum just to keep their servers running. It'll be a fire sale. You'll get your half, I'll get mine, and we can all move on with our lives." She reached into her bag again and pulled out a single sheet of paper and a silver pen. She slid them across the marble toward me. "This is a voluntary dissolution agreement," Sylvia said. "If you sign it, we skip the hearing on Friday. The assets unlock, we split the liquid cash. And I'll even give Reed enough to cover his bridge loan so he doesn't go to federal prison." She looked at Reed, then back to me. "Or, you can fight me in court. But you can't produce Arlo Locke to revoke the proxy. He won't testify. He's too terrified of what I'll do to his reputation. The judge will freeze Vanguard for years. The enterprise contracts will lapse, the patents will become obsolete, and you will inherit nothing but a mountain of legal fees." She tapped the silver pen against the paper. "Your call, kiddo." I looked at the silver pen. It was a Mont Blanc. One of Reed's, no doubt. He had a whole set of them on his desk that he never actually used for anything important. Just heavy, expensive props to make himself feel like a titan of industry while he lost money on mid-tier index funds. I picked it up. Sylvia's smile widened just a fraction. Reed let out a ragged exhale, slumping against the counter as if all the bones in his legs had suddenly dissolved. He thought he was saved. He thought I was going to cave. I didn't uncap it. I rolled the cool metal between my thumb and index finger, feeling the weight of it. "A fire sale," I said, my voice steady. 3.4 million. Liquidated. You take half. You pay off Reed's 600,000, so he doesn't go to prison, which leaves you with roughly 1.1 million before capital gains taxes. "It's a very comfortable million, Petra," Sylvia said, her tone perfectly even, the voice of a reasonable adult explaining simple math to a stubborn child. "And it is exactly 1.1 million more than you will get if this goes into a receivership freeze. If we fight, the IP rots. The enterprise clients will terminate their licensing agreements the moment the patents are flagged by the court. Vanguard becomes worthless." I set the pen down. I placed it perfectly parallel to the edge of the dissolution agreement. Then I slid both of them back across the marble island. "No," Reed grabbed the edge of the counter. "Petra, are you insane? She has the proxy. She has Locke." "Shut up, Reed," Sylvia and I said at the exact same time. Sylvia didn't blink. She just stared at me, her eyes doing a rapid, silent calculation. She was trying to figure out if I was bluffing, if I was just being a grieving teenager lashing out, or if I actually had a card left to play. "I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen, Sylvia," I said, leaning forward slightly, planting my hands on the marble. "You are going to take your illegal proxy, and you are going to walk out the front door. If your San Francisco lawyers file that motion on Friday, I will walk into that courtroom and I will drag this out for 10 years if I have to. I don't care if the IP rots. I don't care if the enterprise clients walk. I will burn Vanguard to the ground before I let you take a single cent of my mother's money." The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded like a jet engine. Sylvia's smile finally vanished. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time all day, I saw a flicker of genuine irritation crack her polished veneer. She picked up the dissolution agreement, folded it neatly in half, and slipped it back into her designer bag. She left the Mont Blanc pen on the counter. "You have until Thursday night to change your mind," she said. "After that, I burn it down for you." She turned and walked out. The front door clicked shut a moment later. Reed stared at me, his face a mask of pure horror. "You just killed me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The bank, they're going to seize everything. Call a realtor," I told him, turning my back and walking out of the kitchen. I took the stairs 2 at a time. The moment my bedroom door clicked shut, the adrenaline left me in a rush, leaving my hands shaking so hard I could barely unlock my phone. I had just bet my mother's entire legacy on a bluff. I had no idea how to stop Sylvia. I just knew I couldn't let her see me bleed. I sat at my desk and pulled up the secure portal. I called Henrik. "She was here," I said the second his face appeared on the screen. "Sylvia. She showed up at the house. She has Arlo's proxy, and she wants to force a fire sale of the patents. Half for her, half for me. And you rejected it," Henrik said. "It wasn't a question. I told her I'd burn it down first. But Henrik, she's not bluffing about Friday. Tuesday. She's going to force the court to freeze it. Then, we need Arlo Locke to testify that the proxy was signed under duress, Henrik replied, his keyboard already clicking in the background. It is the only legal mechanism to invalidate her claim. He won't do it. She's blackmailing him with his psychiatric records from 2006. If he fights her, she's going to leak them to his school board and the state licensing committee. She'll destroy his career. He's terrified. The typing stopped. Psychiatric records? Henrik's voice dropped an octave, the crisp professionalism giving way to something colder, sharper, from a compulsory psychiatric hold. I don't know the exact details. He just said she had his medical files. The breakdown he had when he was working with my mom in Seattle. Petra, medical records of that nature are federally protected under HIPAA regulations. They do not just float around in the public domain for 20 years. To acquire a sealed psychiatric file, Sylvia would have had to commit a federal crime. She either breached a secure hospital database, or she bribed a medical administrator. I sat on the edge of my bed, the realization washing over me like ice water. Extortion, wire fraud, and severe violations of federal health privacy laws. If we can prove how she got those records, the proxy isn't just invalid. Sylvia is looking at mandatory prison time. How do we prove it? I need to know exactly where he was treated, Henrik said. Call him back. Find out the name of the facility in Seattle, the attending physician, and the dates of his hold. I have a data retrieval specialist in Geneva, a woman named Tess. If there is a digital footprint of Sylvia accessing those files, Tess will find it. I hung up and immediately dialed the Portland number. Arlo picked up on the first ring. He sounded even worse than before, his breathing shallow and rapid. Did she come to the house? He asked immediately. Is it done? I didn't sign it, Arlo, and we're not letting her take it. Petra, you don't understand. I do understand. She's threatening to ruin your life. But Arlo, listen to me carefully. How did she get your files? Where were you admitted in 2006? There was a long hesitation. I could hear the faint sound of a lawnmower outside his window. It was a private clinic, he said quietly. Oak Ridge Behavioral. In North Seattle. Is it still open? No, they shut down in 2012. The building is a dental plaza now. What happened to the patient records? By law, they had to be transferred to the regional hospital network for archiving. Pacific Northwest General. They've been sitting on a secure server for 14 years. Nobody has looked at them. Nobody even knew they existed. Until Sylvia walked up to my car with a printed copy of my intake evaluation. Did she have the original copies? Or digital printouts? Printouts, there was a watermark on the corner of the pages. A user ID stamp. She folded the top so I couldn't read the whole thing. But I saw the letters, Med Arch. I wrote it down on a piece of paper on my desk, pressing the pen hard into the notepad. Arlo, hang tight. Do not talk to Sylvia. Do not talk to her lawyer. Turn your phone off if you have to. We are going to fix this. She's going to destroy me, he whispered. She's going to try. I corrected him. I'll call you back. I relayed the information to Henrik through the secure portal. Oak Ridge Behavioral. Absorbed by Pacific Northwest General in 2012. Records pulled from digital archive. Look for user ID starting with Med Arch. 20 minutes passed. The house was dead quiet. I could hear Reed pacing in his study downstairs. The heavy, irregular thud of his footsteps vibrating through the floorboards. He was probably calling bankruptcy lawyers, trying to figure out how to shield his personal assets from the bank. It wouldn't work. My mother had made sure of that when she drafted the prenup. She had always kept her finances separated from his by a wall of reinforced legal steel. Now I understood why. My computer chimed. A video link request from Henrik. I clicked accept. He was sitting in the same gray office, but there was a second window on the screen now. It was an audio-only connection, the waveform spiking slightly with background static. Petra, Henrik said. I have Tess on the line. She has bypassed the external firewall for Pacific Northwest General's digital archives. Hello, Petra. A woman's voice crackled through the speakers. She had a thick, unplaceable European accent. I have located the file for Arlo Locke. It was indeed accessed exactly 42 days ago. Can you see who pulled it? I asked, leaning closer to the screen. The archive requires two-factor authentication for all internal staff, Tess explained. The user ID Med Arch 774 belongs to a senior records administrator named David Hensley. He has worked for the hospital network for 19 years. He had the administrative clearance to pull legacy psychiatric files. Did Sylvia bribe him? That is the logical conclusion, Henrik interjected. But we need proof of the transaction. A bank transfer, an email, a digital handshake. Something that connects Sylvia Vanguard to David Hensley. I am scanning his financial routing right now, Tess said. The sound of rapid, rhythmic typing flooded the audio feed. Looking at his primary checking, savings, nothing anomalous. Checking his spouse's accounts, nothing. If she paid him, she did not do it through traditional banking. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Sylvia was meticulous. She wouldn't just wire $50,000 to a hospital administrator from her personal checking account. She would use a shell. I bolted upright. The bridge loan, I said, my voice suddenly loud in the quiet room. Henrik, Reed's bridge loan. The $600,000 your stepfather leveraged against the Vanguard projections? Yes, the loan he took out to fund the Cayman Island Shell Company. Sylvia set up that shell. She's the sole managing director. Reed thought the loan was just sitting in the Cayman account waiting for the IP transfer. But what if it wasn't? What if she already spent some of it? Henrik was silent for a fraction of a second. Tess cross-referenced David Hensley's name with offshore holding companies registered in the last 2 months. The typing grew frantic. 10 seconds passed, then 20. Got it, Tess said, her voice dropping into a register of pure professional satisfaction. David Hensley is listed as a silent partner in an LLC registered in Delaware 3 weeks ago. The LLC received a single wire transfer of $75,000. The origin of the wire is a Cayman Islands account registered to Sylvia Vanguard. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. We had it. She hadn't just used Reed's loan to trigger the SEC flag. She had used his money to pay the bribe. She used Reed's catastrophic debt to buy the blackmail material she needed to steal my mother's company. Henrik, I said, staring at the camera. Package Package the data, the wire transfer, the access logs, the Delaware LLC registration. Put it all in a single PDF. And then, Henrik asked, a faint trace of a smile touching the corners of his mouth. Do we send it to her lawyer? No, I said, standing up from the desk. We don't talk to her lawyer. We talk to her. I picked up my phone and texted Sylvia. She had only been gone for 20 minutes. She was probably sitting in the first-class lounge at O'Hare, sipping a complimentary martini and feeling like a queen. Don't get on your flight, I typed. Come back to the house. 3 minutes passed. Then my phone buzzed. Are we ready to sign, Petra? I don't have time for a tantrum. I stared at the screen and typed my response with deliberate precision. We're ready to talk about David Hensley and the Delaware LLC and the $75,000 you wired him from the Cayman shell you built with Reed's money. I watched the 3 little typing dots appear. Then they vanished. They didn't come back. I'll be at the kitchen island, I sent. You have 1 hour before Henrik forwards the PDF to the FBI field office in Seattle. She walked back through the front door 47 minutes later. Sylvia didn't strut this time. Her posture was rigidly straight, but the designer bag looked heavier on her shoulder. Her expression was completely blank, a terrifying void where her smug confidence had been just an hour ago. She walked into the kitchen and found me sitting exactly where she had left me. Reed was gone, presumably still packing his life into boxes upstairs, trying to figure out how to outrun a bank recall. I had my laptop open on the Marble Island. On the screen was the PDF Henrik had compiled, the wire transfer receipt, the access logs with Hensley's MedArch ID, the Delaware registry. I spun the laptop around so it faced her. You have terrible operational security for someone trying to pull off a multi-million-dollar hostile takeover, I said, my voice steady in the quiet kitchen. You used Reed's bridge loan to bribe a hospital administrator for sealed psychiatric records. That's a federal crime, Sylvia. It's extortion, wire fraud, and a HIPAA violation all rolled into one very easily prosecutable package. Sylvia stared at the screen. She didn't reach out to scroll. She just looked at the first page, her jaw tight, her eyes tracing the routing numbers that condemned her. What do you want? She asked. Her voice was stripped of all its patronizing warmth. It was just a transaction now. I want you to sit down and write an email to Jasper Farrow, I said. You are going to instruct him to withdraw the emergency liquidation motion immediately. Then you are going to sign a formal revocation of Arlo Locke's proxy, citing personal reasons, and you are going to surrender any and all future claims against the Vanguard IP Trust. If I do that, I get nothing, she said, finally looking up at me. And I'm still liable for the shell company. You get to stay out of federal prison, I corrected her. That's a pretty good deal for a Tuesday. She didn't move. I could see the gears turning in her head, looking for a way out, looking for a loophole, a technicality, a way to spin this. But there were no loopholes in a digital footprint this deep. And Arlo? She asked, her voice tight. Arlo is off limits. If you ever contact him again, if you ever breathe a word about his medical history to anyone, the PDF goes to the authorities. You vanish from his life. You vanish from mine. Sylvia looked at the Mont Blanc pen, still sitting on the marble counter exactly where she had left it. She picked it up, unscrewed the cap, and pulled a blank sheet of paper from her bag. She didn't say a word. She wrote out the revocation in sharp, angry strokes, signed it, and pushed it across the counter. Then she pulled out her phone and drafted the email to her lawyer while I watched. She hit send and dropped the phone back into her purse. Your mother was a cold, calculating bitch, Sylvia said quietly, looking me dead in the eye. She would be proud of you. Goodbye, Sylvia, I said. She turned and walked out. I listened to her heels click across the hardwood foyer, the heavy thud of the front door closing, and the sound of her rental car starting in the driveway and finally pulling away. I let out a long, shaky breath and sank back into my chair. The house was quiet again. I picked up the signed revocation, took a photo of it, and uploaded it directly to the secure portal. It's done, I messaged Henrik. Motion withdrawn, he replied 3 minutes later. Farrow's office just filed the paperwork with the court. The asset freeze is lifted. The trust is fully secure. Well done, executive director. I closed the laptop and carried my phone upstairs to my bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed the Portland number 1 last time. Arlo answered immediately. He sounded like he hadn't moved from whatever spot he was sitting in when we last spoke. Petra, it's over, Arlo, I said softly. She withdrew the motion. She revoked the proxy. She's gone. I heard a sound on the other end of the line, a sharp intake of breath followed by a muffled heavy exhale. It was the sound of a man who had been bracing for a fatal blow and suddenly realized he was going to live. The records? He asked, his voice cracking. Secured. She knows if she ever tries to use them, she goes to prison. You're safe. Your job is safe. Thank you, he whispered. Petra, I don't know what to say. I thought I had lost everything. You didn't, I said. But we do need to talk about the trust. You own 50% of the foundational architecture. That's legally yours. My mother built on top of it, but she couldn't have done it without you. I don't want it, he said quickly. I told you I left that life behind. The money, the pressure, it broke my mind. I don't want any part of Vanguard. I know you don't, I said. So here is what Henrik and I are going to do. We are going to buy out your equity stake. A clean, one-time lump sum payment for your 50% of the seed agreement. No royalties, no corporate board seats, no ongoing ties to the tech sector, just a buyout. He was silent for a moment. How much? $1.7 million. He let out a shaky, disbelieving laugh. I teach high school algebra. Petra, what am I supposed to do with $1.7 million? Pay off your Subaru, I said, a genuine smile finally breaking across my face. Buy a house. Set up a college fund for a kid who needs it. Do whatever you want. It's your money, Arlo. You earned it. We talked for a few more minutes, sorting out the logistics of having Henrik send him the buyout paperwork. When I finally hung up, the afternoon sun was starting to cast long, golden shadows across my bedroom floor. I walked over to the vintage vanity desk. I ran my hand along the smooth wood, feeling the faint outline where the electrical tape had been. My mother had left me a massive, terrifying mess involving greedy relatives, hidden histories, and a multi-million-dollar empire. But she had also left me the tools to clean it up. She had left me Henrik. She had left me the Vanguard IP Trust. And most importantly, she had left me the absolute certainty that I didn't need to depend on anyone anyone else to survive. Downstairs, I heard the heavy thud of a suitcase hitting the hardwood floor. Reed was leaving. He was walking out of this house with nothing but his clothes and $600,000 in fraudulent debt that he would spend the rest of his life trying to outrun. I didn't go down to see him off. I just sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and began reviewing the Q1 enterprise contracts for my company.